Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Let me paint a picture. It's August 28th, 1963. 250,000 people are gathered at our nation's capital. A small 5'7" black man takes the podium and prepares to speak to a white America. What would happen next would change the racial landscape in America, not just for this time period, but for generations to come. Talk to him, Martin.
White sliders to the right?
White sliders?
To the right under the console for the volume. Or unless this bunker doesn't have any.
Oh.
I have a dream.
There we go.
That one day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the hiking Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
And soft snaps, go ahead. So, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech is one of the most memorable speeches of all time. This speech in particular was one of the first televised speeches in America for black people or white people. And Martin Luther King himself is already a very influential speaker. And he's very charismatic. He was in charge of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, but he was still a black man in a racially oppressive nation. And so what was it about this speech specifically that was able to captivate people? And I've narrowed it down to 3 different rhetoric devices. And the first of those rhetoric devices, which they all exemplify as ethos, pathos, and logos, but the first of those rhetoric devices is repetition. And Dr. King uses repetition repeatedly throughout this speech. On page 31 of How to Argue Like Jesus, Carter, who is the author of the book, he explains how it is important when using rhetoric devices to add figures of repetition. And I don't know how many of you know the name Dominic O'Brien. Anybody? No. All right, you shouldn't. But Dominic O'Brien is actually the world champion of memory. I don't know what the standard is for that, but he is the world champion of memory. And he's written many books to give advice and tips on how to make your memory better. And one of his main points is a rule of 5. And by this, he means that by saying a phrase or studying notes, if you go over it 5 times, it should stick in your brain. And so as we use this rule of 5 and we kind of dissect his speech, and you look at some of the different phrases he used the phrase, I have a dream, he used that 8 times. He used the phrase, let freedom ring, 11 times. He used the phrase 100 years later, now is the time and we can never be punished, 5 to 6 times throughout the speech. I don't know if he knew specifically what he was doing, but just the fact that he's reiterating his points so frequently, it helps it stay ingrained in your brain to where it'll stick longer and help push his point home even further. And Dr. King also uses a series of metaphors throughout his speech. And when I think of metaphors and what profession probably would use metaphors the most, I think of ministry. How many times have you gone to a Sunday and your pastor has a message? Typically involved in that message, there's a metaphor somewhere. And so when I thought of, or as I was listening to this speech, I thought of a Sunday service that I went to about 2 weeks ago. And my preacher was talking about how life can be like driving a car. And so when we're born, we have 2 hands on the steering wheel, and we're just driving right on the path of righteousness towards God. And that sin will sometimes get on the path and it'll make us swerve off the road, but as long as we have 2 hands on the wheel, we'll be fine. We'll be able to find that pathway right back to God. But however, there are times where we like losing our faith, something happens in our family, things like that, and we'll lose faith, and maybe we'll take 1 hand off the wheel. And that'll make it harder to come back to the path. Sometimes we lose both hands, and then it's hard to come back to the path of God. And so as I was thinking about Dr. King, you could see some of his ministry background come in throughout his speech. He was using multiple metaphors, sweltering with the oppression, sweltering with the injustice, sweltering with oppression, and talked about sitting down at the table of brotherhood and how we could all come together as a symphony of brotherhood. And just multiple metaphors throughout his speech, because people can grasp on the metaphors. It becomes more relatable when you use metaphors. And he does a very good job of just grasping people's attention using things that they can relate to, and specifically metaphors. And another rhetoric device that he uses throughout his speech is his tone, which on How to Argue Like Jesus, specifically on page 73, they discuss how you need to use eunoia, which is a term that means giving off this kind of friendship feeling and this sort of goodwill, which his demeanor throughout the whole speech is not something of a man who's, for lack of better words, pissed off. Now, he's very upset about the topic that he has to speak about, but his demeanor does not convey that. His demeanor conveys that of a person who wants to just help, that of a person who's trying to do what's best for the common good of the country. And as you hear his tone, when he begins, he's looking down at the sheet, and he's just talking calm, He's reading his words, he'll look up occasionally and survey the crowd, but as his speech continues and he starts to hit some of these major points, you notice his speech will elevate. And as his speech elevates, you also notice a reaction in the crowd, and he keeps adjusting this tone throughout the entire speech to keep his audience engaged. And you can see that they respond well to when you fluctuate with your tone. So that's something that was a good note to take from this. And also, the longer he spoke, if you notice, he stopped looking down at his sheet. And I think that's because he could tell that the momentum was building. He was riding a wave, and once you get started on that wave, it doesn't make sense to look down and stop the momentum. He kept going, and he just kept doing what felt natural. And I think that's important to keep in your speech, is that sometimes you don't always have to go off of what's on the outline. You can have an outline to kind of give you a general basis of what you would like to say. But sometimes if you have a good feel for what you're saying and are confident in your delivery, which he exemplifies that tremendously, then you won't even need the outline per se. You can just speak from the top of your head, speak from your heart. And that'll show that it's much more genuine in your delivery. And so, in conclusion, I would just like to go over again what it is that makes Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech so memorable. And those are the rhetoric devices that exemplify his ethos, pathos, and logos, which are his use of repetition throughout his speech. He's constantly using different metaphors to connect with the audience, and he's giving off a tone that makes him much more personable and not seem like this giant statue of a man, even though he's speaking in front of thousands of people. And I would just like to leave with a closing line, and that is that I have a dream. I have a dream that one day, Mary Darling will sit at a desk and hear Xavier Prather's speech on persuasive analysis and give him an A. Now, this dream can only be realized as we have a class stay together and use our tactics of persuasion to convince her to give Xavier this A. Thank you, my fellow Americans.